Just quick intro here. I am Fabrice Cheng, the co-founder and CEO of Quadrata. We are a Web3 company that focuses on identity for the what we like to call compliant Web3 realm. Compliant Web3 is a new realm that, probably if I spoke to you guys maybe like 12, 24 months ago, you guys would probably have booed me and be like, well, we don't like compliant, we like permissionless. But I think the world is slightly, slowly coming to terms that probably compliant Web3 will coexist alongside permissionless. And today I'm here to talk about the idea of a blockchain-backed ID. Kind of like when we think about identity in the broadest sense, it really hasn't been really, I would say, addressed and hasn't really evolved with the progress of technology. And here I'm here to kind of debate with you guys about why I think blockchain is actually the perfect technology to power digital identity in a world where more and more interactions are being performed online. So let's start with some few definitions because identity is very broad and it's being used very, very interchangeably between people and companies. But identity in the stricter sense is basically a distinguishing characteristic or attributes of an individual entity that basically allow them to say, okay, this is who I am, this is who they are. And when we talk about digital identity, it's basically the digital representation of the above, right? How do we represent that in a digital world? Now we have the terms that everyone probably knows, but probably not many people like, KYC. So KYC and identity is correlated, but not exactly the same. KYC is not used by every company. It's used mainly by financial services who have kind of the obligations to identify yourself to be able to identify the risk of doing business with you. That's quickly associated with what we call AML. Usually KYC is used with KYC AML, but those two are very different things. KYC is, do I know who you are? And AML is based on my country's regulations, am I allowed to do business with you from a regulatory perspective in terms of anti-money laundering laws? The interesting part I learned from doing this job is that AML is not like a pass-fail type of thing. There's not like a law that says, hey, this is where you comply with AML and this is where you don't. And the reason why government don't do that is because as soon as they say this is the minimum, most company goes to the minimum because nobody likes to do compliance, it's a cost. So government are purposely kind of gray in telling you, you should maybe not do this. And we see that with the SEC, right? Like you guys saw that all the time. Why is the SEC not giving us clear guidelines and regulations? Because as soon as they give you some of them, then people just do this. But that doesn't mean that companies still don't have to comply. So there's a bunch of best practices. But it's ultimately, do I know if you are a sanctioned entity? Are you tied to any money laundering activities? And if you are, chances that I won't do business with you. And the last definitions that I want to address is cyber attack. If you guys have heard about cyber attacks, is basically the act of an entity or malicious actors to pretend to be multiple people so that they can take advantage of a system. Things that you guys probably have experienced to an extent if you have participated in a token sale, an airdrop, an NFT mint, you probably in the bull run have not been successful at getting those because it's been bought. All the bots have gotten all the allocations. I used to do that for fun for the NFT. I built bots and mint, I kind of get advantage of that. There's no way human can compete against, people who create those programmatic systems. And please feel free to stop me any questions if you have along the way. So just quick raise of hands here. If you guys have been going through some notion of KYC, AML, who here generally kind of dislike the process of KYC, AML? Raise of hands. Yeah, that's pretty good. I would expect probably like the entire room. So it's interesting because digital identity, you have this love and hate relationship. Which we can see, right? A lot of people be like, oh, identity, I don't like it. But the benefit of digital identity are huge when you think about it. Digital identity allows you to have the convenience of quickly being able to log in and have access to all your informations. And sometimes you can log in for different platforms. If you didn't have that, you have to onboard every single time you want to use a platform, right? The second is that it is a protections, that's counterintuitive, but it is a protections for your security. Now you have identity, you have password, you have biometric facial recognitions, you have all those things that allows to protect access to your account from everybody else. That's pretty good when you think about it. Access to reputations. We all use reputations every day without realizing it. When you go to Google for a restaurant, you look at the reviews. You go on Airbnb, you look at the reviews. You go on Facebook Marketplace, you go on the reviews. We are used to having reviews for everything that we interact with, and that is because we have identity. That's because we can tie that reputation to someone or services. Accountability and compliance, that's not necessarily as much for the customer, but from a business perspective, it's the law. They have to comply, and identity provide a way to trace and see how things are being performed online, and therefore, do we know if this person is tied to any criminal investigations or money laundering activities. And last but not least, personalization. Because of identity, everything that you do is personalized. You go on TikTok, you probably scroll up and then you have a bunch of cat videos or dog videos because you like cats and dogs. So you wouldn't have that without an extent of personalizations to you. But why do people dislike digital identity or identity broadly? I think there's a fair share of it of why we dislike it, right? And I just pick a few headlines, but I'm pretty sure I can fill this entire a few slides out of it. The first one is data breach, the data security. I think everyone here, at least when I talk to people, we kind of have just assumed like, well, I don't care about my data because my data is online. It's available on the dark web because some of the companies are logged in have lost their data, right? And this one here, this one here is a big one in the US. If you live in the US and you have some private data about yourself, chances are it's out there, it's locked, it's lost because this Equifax company holds basically the data of every US citizen. The second is kind of the KYC ML process. Like you all raise your hands of saying I don't like it because it is annoying. I just went through KYC 5 days ago, and the technology didn't work well. I have to upload my ID. This is it's too dark, it's too blurry. I have to do it again and again, and just nobody likes to have to bring their passport out or their ID out. It's just not intuitive for you, and you're like, why do I need to do this? So it's a cumbersome process, and more importantly, you have to do it over and over again with every financial services that you want to use, right? You did that for Coinbase, you did that for Binance. The repetition is annoying. The third one, in my opinion, is a big one as well. The fact that when you create an account, the value doesn't accrue to you. If you have an amazing seller account on Amazon and you have 10,000 reviews and 4.9 stars, then you go to eBay, you're nobody. This user here have the Twitter handle X, and it got taken by Elon Musk because he wanted to rename it X. I mean, I think I heard they got decent amount of money, but I think that can happen anytime, right? And last but not least, the privacy aspect of it. You don't know what happens to your data. You don't know if it's being resale, all those things. So all those reasons, I think, are the major reasons as to why people dislike digital identity, and rightfully so. So the question is like, if we were to rebuild or evolve digital identity, how can we fix those problems such that all the benefits can still exist, but we can reduce drastically the negative aspect? So the concept of portable user-owned digital identity is what I believe is kind of like a next step towards solving the pain points of identity. Obviously, there's not one right solutions, but the concept of if you are a user, first of all, and you only have to onboard once, instead of onboarding over and over again, me giving data to the company, that would solve a lot of like the KYC frictions. I think most people wouldn't raise their hand as much if they only had to do it once, right? The second aspect is if it is user-owned, meaning that you, as the user, when you're on board once, you are given kind of this digital passport, and that digital passport belongs to you. Everything that gets attached to you, your reputations, your financial services, your transactions belongs to you. Like nobody can take it away from you, and therefore that value accrues to you. And the third piece, I think, which is very important, is how do we, now that it belongs to you, how do we redesign it such that there's a better access to your data where you have control over it. Today, when you give you data, that's it. Everyone has access to your data. You don't really control who access what. And most of the time, you are giving everything just to when they only need a portion. Example, right? Maybe not in Europe, in France, I don't know. But in the US, if I go to a bar, they're gonna ask for my ID just to prove that I'm over 21 so I can drink. Well, they don't need to know my first name, my last name, my date of birth, my address and those things, but they see everything. What if they have a way to just say, hey, can I access your date of birth, or can I access the proof that you're above 21? That's enough. So if you can have some baked in that technology, some control where you give consent to proof of verification or underlying PII, that would actually solve a lot of the privacy concerns that users have, and making sure that your data doesn't get, end up in the dark web. Blockchain is interesting here because it can actually embed integrate like a lot of those properties, right? Like the one-time verification process that could be reused. When I speak to a lot of people here who are technical, they understand that smart contract, for example, can be easily integrated by a lot of services. So that one-time onboarding process is great. How to attach it? You can attach it to a wallet and then it becomes right away user-owned. Access control, you can give that through permissions, which is a pretty seamless thing to do in Web3 as well. And the great thing about also smart contract is that you can integrate through on-chain, off-chain. That's more like a blockchain thing, but I think the need for blockchain identity today is more prominent. How do we still have interactions on a smart contract, on a ledger, without having this third party in the middle? And then if you're powering all blockchain network, that solves the problems of like blockchain diversification as well. The aspect of here that's solved blockchain is also the concept of, is blockchain going to be a big part of the infrastructure? My belief, and I think a lot of people who work in blockchain today, we are working still in a niche community, but our hope, I believe, is that blockchain will become a key infrastructure, right? What if in the future, as the next step of internet, every company would have as part of their infrastructure a part where there's a blockchain that connects. And the reason why there's a blockchain that connects is because now they can have access to the entire world and easily integrate with the entire world. So I believe that blockchain could be this internet layer for digital identity. When you have to think about where to build it, blockchain makes sense for the following reason. First of all, it's global. If you were to build an identity, a digital identity, where usually digital doesn't have a border, right? When you transact digitally, you have no border, you need a technology that is global. Blockchain is global. It is also composable. If you need to build a digital identity that could be used across many applications without having to re-onboard, you need an easy way to integrate a technology like that. At our company, we build a technology where big companies takes less than 2-3 business days to integrate. If you have worked with standard KYC, you look at probably like in the month type of time frame. Decentralized, very important, because you don't want Elon Musk to take away your identity, right? You want to make sure that this is yours, and everything that you accrue to belongs to you. The wallet is the perfect single sign-on, right? Today we don't realize, but wallet has already become a single sign-on. Once we solve the complexity of how to have a wallet, meaning that a user wouldn't know there's a wallet behind the scene, they would have a perfect single sign-on. The reason why also it's a great single sign-on for identity is the fact that in blockchain, you attach to your wallet some financial assets, right? You have cryptocurrencies, you have NFTs, and therefore you tend to put more emphasis and time into securing the wallet. Well, I'm sure most people have gotten hacked here, but it's still, we're learning, right? But the aspect of attaching an ID, which is very important, right? Your passport, you don't want to lose it. What better than like a wallet where you have also crypto assets next to it? And because it is self-owned, again, the value is accruing to you. That's very important. Like nobody can take it away. Anything that you attach to it, once you have a strong foundation, will accrue to you. You can move that away. No longer you need to have reviews per company. You can have a reviews based on who you are and bring that elsewhere. We always talk about how companies always like to have more data points. If you pay your Netflix bill, it should be a reputation that proves that you can pay a Netflix bill for elsewhere. And those things, they are not possible until you have a technology like that. So I'm going to take two quick examples of how digital identity is already happening in Web3. It's still in the early days, but I want to showcase to you like some use cases here. So on the left side, you have a company that we work with, for example, called Ingo. They're a new company, but what they focus on is crypto mixers. They are basically Tornado Cash with compliance because they want to not go to jail. So what they do is that they use an identity solutions that provides KYC AML on one side. I forgot if it's a deposit or withdrawal, but therefore they ensure that everyone who's mixing, they provide more insurances that everyone who's mixing their funds are not tied to any anti-money laundering or criminal activities. And so you can still have the privacy of mixing your funds, but now you can remove, I would say, the risk of bad actors coming in. So that's kind of how they solve it and how digital identity can help with use cases like that. On the right side, you have a French company, very well known, French, I don't know, but they have a big founding team in France, Sandbox. Sandbox, what they do is that it's a metaverse Web3 game, right? And what happened is that they give rewards at the end of every season. And the interesting part about the rewards is that as any financial incentives, it gets bought very quickly, meaning that at the end of the day, not the real users are getting rewarded, but the bots. So what they end up implementing is KYC for Sybil resistance. So they force every user who wants to claim the reward to have own a digital identity so you can verify who they say they are and make sure that there's a uniqueness in those people. That means that if you were to bot and try to game the system, you can only game it once. You cannot game it 10 or 100 times. So, the feedback from the community was actually overwhelmingly positive. They were very afraid. I was talking to the CEO. They were like, I'm not sure if the community is going to be upset because we forced them to go through KYC. But the community actually responded well because they're like, now we can prevent bots from ruining the experience. So two different use cases of how digital identity help already Web3 companies. But clearly, I think there's going to be a new wave of a lot of them focused on compliance, but a lot of them also maybe not. And I think as this portable identity becomes more and more mainstream, if suddenly, let's say, 90% of this room had a passport ID, it wouldn't be, I would say, unrealistic to think that companies might give you incentives because they know who you are. They can attach to reputations. Twitter, potentially, to fight bots, they could rely on this portable blockchain ID to say, okay, this person is a real person because most people own one. And in a world, I think, with all the emerging tech, AR, VR, AI, there's already a lot of fake videos. I heard some horrible stories about people calling, grandparents with the voice of their family members, and it's impossible for them to distinguish that this is a different person. And that's going to be scarier and scarier because you can't tell what's real, what's not. And in a world where you cannot tell what's real and what's not, digital identity are going to be a key factor. And one of the main benefits of blockchain is source. It's the ledger that you can verify that this is coming from a trusted source, because you cannot fake that. So again, just to add to the argument of how blockchain is really, that we should embrace blockchain backed identity for a trusted digital world. I think the perfect technology for that, to make sure that we can remove the frauds and all the impersonations of threats, blockchain-based ID, backed ID are, in my opinion, similar to all those new technology, a way to improve identity in the digital world. And that's it for my pitch here for blockchain-backed ID. If you have any questions.
Thanks. Let's say indeed you want to do like a digital ID copied to like a real passport or identity card. Like how would you see that be done in practice without ruining the UX for the user? Like I know in the Lisbon Hackathon this weekend there was a bounty. I don't think anybody worked on it, but they set a bounty for developing a system where somebody could cryptographically prove they're a unique human using their European identity card, because it already has a chip with you can sign messages with it.
Right.
Is that something you would see happening, or do you have anything else in mind that could be a good solution?
Yeah, so what you talked about, if I understand correctly, is that you have identity in the sense of, I need to authenticate myself. Like a lot of products that we use don't require the stricter government ID type of things, right? But Facebook, they don't ask you for your real ID, right? But as soon as you want to use financial services, then suddenly government ID comes into place. That's when KYC, AML happens. That's when most people raise their hands and be like, oh, I don't like it. How do we improve the UX as part of it? I think today KYC, AML is already very well automated, but you cannot automate everything. And they still need to have a compliance team and a centralized entity is verifying that the document is not fake, that your name, we have, if your name is John Smith, there's like a zillion John Smith in the US, and chances are one of them is on a sanction list. So all those things have to be reviewed manually by compliance officers. So you cannot remove the centralization part of it for compliance, at least not from a legal perspective. But how we improve the UX is the fact that you only have to do it once. If I tell you that you have to onboard your government ID and attach it to your digital ID, but you do it once instead of doing it for every company that you do it, and as you said, you can just show proof that you have been verified by this entity, I think that's how, in my opinion, at least a big UX improvement happens. And not only, I think, from a user perspective, but from a security perspective as well. You as a user don't have to share your data with every single company. You only do it once, and they can just get proof of verification. Most companies don't want to store a lot of our customers. The reason why they work with us is because they say, we have a Web3 audience. We want to tell them that we don't see and store the PII. We don't want to have access to it. We just want to have access to proof that you pass KYC, that you pass AML, that you pass what is screening, for example.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk. I wonder, do you know if any government or big companies are working on this technology, like really leveraging blockchain for identity?
Absolutely. I think not only government are looking into it, you have banks, big banks looking into it. I think it's a sector where everyone understands that the identity has to be somehow more efficient. And we have been in talk with Singapore regulators. We are in talk very regularly with ex-regulators in the US. I think it's something that is a lot of companies are trying to standardize and normalize. I think the way we think about this is that it takes too long generally to standardize something. It takes a long time for make sure that everyone uses the same terms. We believe that standardizations might happen more easily through adoptions. If you ship a product, kind of like the startup way. You ship a product, you see that it's being used, you see that customers are happy with it, then that becomes a standard. So we are still in those conversations, knowing that they're interested, they want to learn about what we know, but we are not actively working with them to standardize things, or like even consortiums of companies. You have verite standards, you have so many standards that everyone's trying to be the standard, and that's the trade-off here. But if you don't have a standard, then you end up with 10 solutions, and then you become also like you remove like the entire advantage of one-time onboarding. So my guess is that it's kind of like a rush to make sure that you are adopted today, not in 10 years. And if you're adopted today, then likely it's like there might be like 2, maybe top 3 winners, and it's a lot more easy to handle with 2 winners or 3 winners than hundreds of them.
Thank you.
So, yes, so what's your stance on AML? Because you said, okay, like the government are purposely making the rule not clear to avoid minimal compliance, but don't you think that AML is actually unethical in the sense that it's violating rule of law? So this means, normally a law, you cannot do this, and you should do this, so you can follow it. While here, we don't even give you the rule, and we want to punish you for violating rules that were not even given to you. And the second part is, AML is not punishing people who are guilty, they are punishing people who are suspect. So I think like AML is something which is extremely unethical. And do you want to contribute to AML, or do you think we can get crypto systems which will make all the AML institutions basically obsolete?
That's super interesting questions, and I have at length debates with my GC. I'm like, well, how is that possible that you can get penalized, but you don't give clear guidance? And I think what my GC always tell me is like, well, such is life, and that's really the things with the law is law in general is the same thing, right? You're not supposed to ignore the law, but law is always kind of like black and white. That took me a long time to understand that compliance is not black and white. It's a spectrum of risk depending on where you are. For example, crypto is a good example. You have a bunch of financial services that felt comfortable trading on Uniswap, doing things on Tornado Cash and so forth, knowing very well that it's unclear if you can do that. Normally, as a financial services, you're supposed to only interact with people who have been vetted. Do you know that the funds are not used for criminal activities? But companies are basically assessing that the risk of doing it today is worth it. So it's always like that. It's a risk spectrum from companies, and it's a cost basis as well. So there's no guidelines, and I think that doesn't remove you from the shackle of the law and the bottlenecks of the law, that you have to still make best efforts to make sure that you are complying in that sense. And I think unethical, I think from a perspective of a user as well, like today you have people that lives in countries that are labeled sanctioned by the US, and they did nothing wrong, but they cannot access most of the world financial services just because the US says this country is sanctioned, right? The problem with this is that as a company, you are basically faced with 2 situations. Either you say, well, I think it's wrong, and I'm going to allow people from Iran to interact with my platform, but then the chances that you will go to jail, or you'll be a big fine for doing that. So as a company, you're usually often you face the high risk of allowing someone, and that's usually not worth the case. So that's what you meant by people are suspected. Some companies, sometimes they would rather not do business with a person, even though they're not sure if that's the same person or a sanctionist or not. So when my compliance team goes for a review, sometimes you have a name that has 100 people, that they have to manually make sure that it's not the same person. If there's a doubt that it's the same person, they'd rather take the proactive measures of blocking access than granting access. I've heard stories about people who share the same first name, last name, date of birth of someone on a sanctioned countries, sanctioned entities, and every time they want to fly, they can't. And companies just say, well, I'm sorry, we'd rather just not take the risk. And that part is unethical, it doesn't seem right, but that's the perspective of a company, and it's hard to imagine. It's a lot bit easier to understand why they go through that. How to improve that? I think leveraging new technology is always good to be able to show a better way of doing it. When you go too far to the extreme, you also run the risk of being labeled by the government as oh, this is not at all a solution that works. So I think it's finding where you can improve efficiency while still making sure that they are okay with it. Even in all cases, we are keeping the same KYC, keeping the same email process, adding wallet screening. The only thing we change is the fact that you can do it once and reuse it. And even that, it's yet to see if that's going to be adopted by the law, by regulators around the world. So I think it's hard to add that and say, well, from now on, no AML, or AML has to be 100%, or you don't get a passport.
So I think the point is you say my company. I think here's the whole idea of crypto blockchain in the first place was to make automated decentralized system which do not belong to anyone. So you don't have any point in regulation. Because, okay, Tornado Cash, you can arrest some people if you want to. Tornado Cash is still working, I still use it, it's working well, even Bitcoin, what is the name Bitcoin? What is the guy was anonymous? What is the guy make something which was completely decentralized because you had two projects before, Liberty Dollar and I forgot the other name, which basically got sued, and one of the project founder even went to jail for that. So they say, okay, it's not gonna be my coin, it's gonna be a decentralized system that I don't have any specific control of, and so I don't need to follow regulations, not because I will violate the regulation, but just because I don't even have the power to. I think one very interesting article of Vitalik is power as a liability. And the idea is that if you can do something, you will be liable toward government in doing it. But if you just can't, like Uniswap can't force people to KYC. They don't control the contract. They just make the contract. Anyone can use it. If Uniswap puts some KYC in the front end, someone is going to pop up another front end, and there will be no KYC in Uniswap anyway.
In Uniswap before they have the option to do hooks and embed the KYC in the smart contract.
But it's not built in the protocols. I hear your point, and I think it's not even a counter argument. It's just kind of what we've seen. Is that I agree with you, and I think some things seem to work. Right, Bitcoin, I think, as much as it's hated, it's kind of becoming unstoppable at that point. On the other side, Tornado Cash is a perfect example, right? You have someone who shipped the protocol and have zero control of it, cannot stop it, and now is in jail. So the concept of saying, oh, I don't have control because I shipped it, in the eyes of the law doesn't remove you from it, unfortunately. So I think find the right balance between the two is difficult, and when the government doesn't tell you also how it is, from our perspective, our industries, the people that we talk to, especially in DeFi, a lot of people have shipped in those decentralized way, thinking DeFi and relinquishing control. I think it's unclear if foundation DAO is enough to remove you from it. I think we're gonna see hopefully in the next 10 years if that's enough. But in our perspective, when I talk to my GC, when I talk to most people close to regulators, it seems like they tend to agree that DeFi doesn't exist in the sense that it's not fully decentralized. And that's true because you always have a foundation, you always have company upgrading, right? You always have some level of control. ZeroX got sued by CFTC, and they added something in the front end, which is not a smart contract, but it's added something in the front end. Uniswap added something in the front end to remove the regulator from trading. There's always someone to knock at the door, and the reason why maybe Bitcoin was successful is that I know Satoshi, but nobody knows who that person or this entity is, so maybe that's why. But Tornado Cash also, fun fact, not fun fact, but it's working, you can go there. But chances that if you send that money to any exchange, even if you do multiple hoops, your wallet will be labeled as a high-risk sanctioned wallet. So it's still working, but I would advise against using it, especially if you plan on at some point interacting with financial services, because you will be labeled as such. And it's not just direct hook, it's many hooks.
That's it, guys. Thank you, Fabrice.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.